Welcome to another edition of Tax Watch, the program brought to you by the concerned taxpayers of Duval County through the courtesy of Comcast Cable, Channel 99, which attempts to enlighten you, the taxpayers, as to the assorted shenanigans that are constantly going on in city government. One thing that I wanted to note today, my name is John Winkler, former president of the Concerned Taxpayers. There is presently a movement to have City Council in Jacksonville abrogate its responsibilities to review the financial incentives that are awarded to companies when they move to downtown or when they come to Duval County. There's an agency called the JEDC, which currently, when it puts together an incentive package, has to go to City Council, has to get City Council's approval on each one of the deals that it does. The Everbank deal, if you're aware of that, to move portions of Everbank a few blocks off of Riverside Avenue to downtown and some other portions of Everbank from the suburbs. That's a JEDC deal. Millions of dollars involved in that and taxpayer incentives. The movement now is to ask City Council to, in effect, make the JEDC an independent authority, to have a budget item annually, give the JEDC a certain pot of money that it can then use to award what we consider to be corporate welfare to various businesses. The problem that we have with that, of course, is twofold. One, any independent agency tends to abuse its independence. And second, anytime you set up a budget for some kind of independent agency, you're guaranteed that it's going to spend that entire budget. So without any oversight from the City Council, or the only oversight being the next year's budget, this is not a good move. So we urge you to call your City Council person. If you go to our website at jaxtaxpayers.org, we have a list of City Council members. You can also call 630-CITY and ask for the phone numbers of your City Council members. Call them, tell them that the JEDC needs to remain completely under the authority and control of the City Council. Now, with me here today and for the balance of the show is one of our members of the Board of Directors of the Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County, Mr. Curtis Lee, who in a past life used to do a lot of work in the pension field in New York State. He is previously an attorney in New York. He is now retired and here in Jacksonville since 2003. Came to his attention very early on in after he moved here that Jacksonville has a public pension mess. And with no further ado, Curtis, tell us what it is that you've done in the last couple of years, and do mention the lawsuit that I think you've just prevailed in as well.
All right. I started looking into the pension mess about 2 years ago. And first, I'll talk about what is the pension mess. Jacksonville has 3 pension plans which are called in the trade defined benefit pension plans. And they provide pensions to people who are employed by the JSO, the fire department, the city itself, and the corrections officers. And they provide these pensions under a formula which is years of service times accrediting rate times final average salary. Okay, thank you. The pensions are then paid out annually, and each pensioner gets a 3% boost in their benefits each year. They call it cost of living, but it's a guaranteed boost. Some pensioners have to wait for 5 years after they retire before they start getting these cost of living adjustments. Others get them right away. The pension benefits are very expensive and lavish from a private sector standpoint because basically the private sector doesn't provide traditional pensions anymore. They provide 401ks. But the city's under the old system where the employees get pensions after they have completed their service. And many of the pensioners in the city are in their 40s and 50s, so there's a lot of people collecting a lot of money for a long time. The
Well, why don't you just,
okay, sure.
Folks out here may not be aware the difference between a public service pension and something like Social Security.
All right.
I mean, obviously, Social Security is something that most people are familiar with, and the kinds of amounts that folks receive. Why don't you give a little comparison? Just when you talk about lavish or generous pensions, they really don't know that you're talking about.
The Social Security used to start at age 65 with reduced benefits at age 62. And now Social Security has been a little bit reduced so that depending on when you are born, you will get your Social Security benefits starting in either 65, 66, or 67, or somewhere in between, but reduced at 62. And the only way you get anything under Social Security before the age of 62 is if you are disability retirement or a few other programs. But the general bulk of American workers do not get Social Security until 62 or later. In contrast, the city employees, there's a little over 8,000 currently, when they retire, they can retire earlier than 62. The police and firemen currently can retire after 20 years of service, which means they can retire at 42 and get a full pension. Other city employees have to wait longer. The general employees can retire at 55, and that's going to be changed for future people to age 60. But either way, they get their retirement early, and they don't get a penalty for taking it early, and the numbers are stark. Social Security averages about $14,000 a year for American retirees right now. The police and firemen in 2008 averaged $46,000 a year. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, no more recent data have been published, but it's fair to guess that the police and firemen currently retire at average at $50,000 a year, and on average they take their retirement at age 49. So you throw in the fact that they retire on average at 49, close to $50,000 a year, and then they get all these 3% cost of living adjustments. Pretty soon they're up to $100,000 a year, and pretty soon, I'm exaggerating a bit, but 24 years of 3% cost of living adjustments results in a doubling of pension. So if I were a 49-year-old policeman retiring today in Jacksonville at $50,000 a year, at age 71, I would be getting $100,000 a year. If I made it to age 97 or 95, I'd be getting $200,000 a year. So that's why I describe it as expensive or lavish or generous or however you might want to call it. But it's, compared to the private sector, it's a very, 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 very rich pension benefit, and it's very costly. And that leads up to the problem Jacksonville has right now, that pension costs take up about 14% of the general fund budget. About $150 per person per year in taxes goes to these three pension plans. And the pension plans are, even with all that, they're $1.7 billion in the hole, which works out to about $2,000 for each person in Jacksonville, including children. So if you're a household of three, you've got a $6,000 debt associated with these pension plans, and that assumes your average. High income and people with high property values, their debt associated with the pension mess is a lot higher than $6,000, and their costs per annum associated with the pension debt are a lot more than $450. And it's not just property taxes, it's also associated with taxes that are on top of the property insurance you pay, and it's also sales taxes. So they get you in a whole variety of ways, and they take all that money, and $140 million a year in fiscal 2012 will go into the three city pension plans. And the worst of the plans is the police and fire plan, because that's the most lavish. Currently, the City Council is considering a bill called 2011-400, which would slightly modify the police and fire pension plan and benefits. I've taken a very careful look at it. It's about 50 pages in length, and it's not just the 50 pages in length. There's an agreement associated with it, and there's a whole bunch of history associated with it, and there's a lot of things. It's not like reading a 50-page novel. It's a lot more complicated. But at any rate, the city has been talking about pension reform and saying, oh, this reform is so wonderful, it's so wonderful. And unfortunately, when I've been going through 2011-400, what I have discovered is it's not so wonderful at all.
Well, former Mayor Payton, I think, was claiming almost $1 billion in savings that would come out of this bill.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. Mayor Payton started out claiming $1.3 billion in savings, and then the unions insisted that the mayor would negotiate with the Police and Fire Pension Fund Board of Trustees. When the mayor started doing that through his staff, the savings started declining, and the savings ended up being supposedly $793 million. But the problem with that claim is that more than half of that claim relates to 2038 or later. They basically added up supposed savings and did not present value those supposed savings. If you present value those supposed savings, according to our city's auditor, you reduce that level to $115 million. However, I don't even believe that, because we all know from experience that if someone says, oh, you'll save a lot of money 30 years in the future, are you really going to even see those savings 30 years in the future? You might be dead 30 years in the future, but if you're alive, 1,000 things can happen. It's highly conjectural. It's basically a huge guess, an educated guess perhaps, but it's still a guess. So the $115 million is very doubtful, but there's a really bad quid pro quo that the city gave up along the way as part of this deal, and they didn't disclose it in their press releases. The quid pro quo is a 12% contribution floor. The 12% contribution floor, which is complicated and I won't really go into it, but the idea is more or less 12% of payroll is guaranteed to go into the Police and Fire Pension Fund. That guarantee is dangerous. All guarantees are dangerous, and it's a 19-year guarantee. It's dangerous because of the principle it sets. Before, the city had the flexibility of lowering pension plan contributions if things were good, if investments performed well. But now the Police and Fire Pension Fund and the unions that are behind it want to back the city into a corner and force it to always throw that 12% into the fund, come hell or high water. And when times are bad, you're stuck with a guarantee like that, and that's very bad. Plus, the guarantee doesn't cover the costs of amortizing, which means spreading out over time the $1.7 billion deficit, $1 billion of which is associated with the Police and Fire Pension Fund. So the current situation where we're throwing $76 million a year into the Police and Fire Pension Fund, instead of going down, that will be going up for a while, and probably forever and ever.
Well, do we still have a guaranteed investment return rate?
Well, there is no guaranteed investment return rate. There's an assumed investment return rate. Right now it's 8.5%.
And if that's not met, the city is responsible for making that up?
Yes, the city gets the worst of both worlds. If the investments perform worse than the 8.5%, it has to keep on throwing more money in ad infinitum. If there's a great year, say investments do 15 or 20%, the city can't get the full benefit of that because of these contribution floors and guarantees.
Okay, so in essence, in the past, when investments were returning very well, the city was not contributing that entire amount, this would force the city to continue to put in that money.
And as a matter of history, between 1937 and 2000, in most years, the city contributed less than 12% of its payroll, of this police and fire payroll, to this plan. Since that time, the contribution levels have been going up and up and up because, as we all know, since 2000, American and foreign stock markets have performed quite poorly, and much of any pension plan is invested in common stocks. So the city, unfortunately, the city, it's heads I win, tails you lose from the union standpoint. The unions have a deal that heads they win and tails the city loses at all times. If the investments perform well, the money goes into the fund. If the investments perform poorly, the city has to make certain minimum contributions anyway. So it basically is sort of an encouragement of irresponsibility. Irresponsibility in two parts. Part one of the irresponsibility is it encourages investment irresponsibility, taking lots of risks, because neither the employees nor the unions lose if risks are taken. And it also encourages irresponsibility in clamoring for more benefits, because if they get more benefits, and they have in the past, obviously they had to, or else they wouldn't be retiring at 49 on average. If they get more benefits, then the city has to just keep on funding it. The employees historically have never paid anywhere near the cost of their of having these pension plans. So that's the thing that scares me the most about this supposedly great deal, is that it involves a guarantee. The other thing that scares me a lot about this deal is that the city should not be dealing at all with the police and fire pension fund. It's a entity that's unaccountable to taxpayers and that has a lot of disreputable aspects. One of the most distressing things about the police and fire pension fund is that the city has not audited it in over 10 years. I started digging into the audit situation a while back, and I've been digging further. In 2007, I got these documents through public records requests, but in 2007, the Deloitte and Touche here in Jacksonville fired the police and fire pension fund as an external auditor.
How much money is in the fund?
$1 billion.
$1 billion.
$1 billion.
With a B.
$1 billion,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Pretty soon we're talking about real money.
Yes,
All right.
$1 billion. Deloitte and Touche fired the police and fire pension fund as a client. That doesn't happen too often. I tried to find out why, and I was ignored, which bothers me. Why can't they explain why they fired the police and fire pension fund? But then the police and fire pension fund went out and asked 22 accountants to be its external auditor. And what happened? Only one firm even wanted to be. One firm responded to the request for proposal. And so the police and fire pension fund hired that one firm. That one firm is called Grau & Associates. It's located in Boca Raton. And if you look at a map, you'll see that Boca Raton's about 300 miles away from here. That firm, as of the last time I was able to get on their website, and there's no guarantee you can get on their website, which gives you an idea of what kind of accounting firm they are. That firm, last time I saw, had 2 CPAs. CPAs means Certified Public Accountants. So the police and fire pension fund is being audited by this dicey little firm 300 miles away, and that's the only entity that we are relying on to tell us that there's no shenanigans going on at the police and fire pension fund. So everything about this, the history of this audit matter, leads me to think that, hey, this is scary. We ought to get a forensic audit now of the police and fire pension fund before anybody signs any 19-year deal with them. We're throwing all this money into the police and fire pension fund, $76 million a year currently, and likely to go up, and people talk about 19-year deals with them, and we want to give them some sort of floor contribution level, and yet the city hasn't audited them in over 10 years, and their external auditor is a tiny little firm in Boca Raton that has a website that doesn't work half the time. It just is mind-boggling.
Does the fund have a professional manager, and is that person the same person that's doing these negotiations?
The executive in charge of the Police and Fire Pension Fund is John Keene, who gets a salary of about $239,000, and he gets a pension of about $60,000, and he gets a few other things. So he takes over $300,000 a year from the fund. He has been responsible for his side of the negotiations with the city. The chief city negotiator has been Carrie Stewart, who's the chief administrative officer. They have staff, and they do get the checks out, and they also hire external money managers like various investment firms. But I can't put my finger on anything right now because they don't want me involved in anything they do. But it is very disconcerting to have an audit situation like that, because when you have $1 billion, it is possible for a few dollars to seep through cracks, and you really need to have a top-notch local auditor. All of this sort of segues into a recent lawsuit. Because I have no official standing vis-a-vis the Police and Fire Pension Fund, and no right generally to audit the Police and Fire Pension Fund. The Police and Fire Pension Fund hired its own auditor, the Sgrau and Associates. I had another idea in 2009, which is that I would do sort of a mini audit. I didn't want to do a complete audit of the Police and Fire Pension Fund, but I wanted to get a bunch of documents associated with the Police and Fire Pension Fund. So I submitted a letter, and there was a lot of back and forth in late 2009. And we came to an impasse, and basically they jerked me around quite a bit. So I said I would file a lawsuit, and basically they gave me, well, I won't get into that, but they were uncooperative, and so I ended up suing. One of the things they wanted me to do was pay them $326 for the privilege of assembling and looking at documents. And I said, no way, I'm not paying $326. So that's the start of the lawsuit. The lawsuit has been recently resolved with a judicial ruling. It's partly in my favor. But when I found out what the Police and Fire Pension Fund spent to defend this lawsuit, over $160,000, I was floored. A lawsuit that started out with the effort, an attempted effort to look at documents where $326 was initially the amount of dispute, and they kept on fighting with me and spent more than $160,000 on lawyers. To me, that's like proof of the fact that the Police and Fire Pension Fund just can't be trusted with money. To waste all that money on this relatively minor lawsuit.
Well, I assume you had some attorney's fees.
Yes, I did. I had approximately $30,000.
So you had a 5 times the bang per buck that the pension fund managed.
In fact, by now it's a little bit more than $30,000 because they're still fighting. They're trying to get the judge to amend his order. 5 minutes or 5 seconds? 5 minutes, okay. They're trying to get the judge to amend his order. So the ultimate fees will be more than $30,000, but the thing is, it's so irresponsible. It should, and think about it again. I tried to do a mini audit, and they put up all sorts of roadblocks. It wasn't just the 326, they put up other roadblocks. They said I had to hire somebody to watch over me while I was in their offices, and they have 8 employees. Why should I have to hire someone to watch over me? It was demeaning, it was ridiculous, it was preposterous. So it's obvious they have a lot to hide. I mean, I've been around people who have things to hide, and everything about the Police and Fire Pension Fund suggests that the Police and Fire Pension Fund, John Keane and staff, have a lot to hide.
Well, and let me mention that you have another lawsuit which challenges their authority to even be the negotiating unit, which we have joined in as a group, the Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County. And now I'm going to throw you into your 3-minute elevator speech because we're running out of time.
I know we are. I know. I'm sorry for being verbose. The lawsuit that I and the Concerned Taxpayers have filed against the city and the Police and Fire Pension Fund basically challenges the city's legal right and the Police and Fire Pension Fund's legal right to negotiate benefits between themselves on behalf of union members. The union members would be members of the Jacksonville Association of Firefighters and the Fraternal Order of Police, and those unions represent the members of the police and fire forces, the Jacksonville Fire Department and the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. The challenge has several aspects to it, but the biggest aspect is that the Police and Fire Pension Fund is not a labor union. And only labor unions under the law, and I'm grossly simplifying, only labor unions can negotiate on behalf of their members. They cannot delegate this right to a governmental agency. The Police and Fire Pension Fund, oddly enough, is a governmental agency. It's just one that is unaccountable to the taxpayers because it is controlled by the unions. It is a governmental agency, but it acts like a union. And it can't wear those two hats. It has to be one or the other. So we are saying that the Police and Fire Pension Fund, as a governmental agency, cannot act as a labor union for employees of the government, the police and firemen. And there's another aspect to that, which is that collective bargaining agreements cannot have more than 3 years of life, 3 years duration, whereas this proposed 2011-400 would have a 19-year life, and the predecessors to 2011-400 had a 30-year duration. That duration is illegal under Chapter 447 of Florida statutes.
So obviously you are urging the City Council to throw out 2011-400 as a bill.
Yes.
Start all over from scratch.
Correct.
And you would encourage the viewers to contact their City Council people, as I was encouraging them before, whether they're calling 630-CITY or they're going to jackstaxpayers.org and looking up their council person's phone number. They should also email them, contact them any way they can.
I would encourage them not only to defeat 2011-400, but to take all necessary steps to reform the Police and Fire Pension Fund, to make it accountable, and to change its management and structure.
All right. Thank you, Curtis Lee. I know you've been carrying on the good fight here, appearing in front of City Council, and some people would say haranguing City Council for some time now.
I do it very pleasantly.
Yes, and we'll continue to do so. So on behalf of the Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County, myself, John Winkler, Curtis Lee, we urge everybody out there to go to our website at jackstaxpayers.org. It's on the screen along with our telephone number. And until our next show next month, good luck, God bless, bye.